Live and in person here from Epping, New Hampshire, home of three of New Hampshire's governors. Prescott being one, the other two I don't remember who the hell they are. Mr. B, this is Politicking with Mr. B. It has been a wonderful day we've had today. It was not too hot, it was not too cold, and they had just the right amount of humidity to make me wear this thing. So things are going on. What a beautiful day, ladies and gentlemen. I want to thank you very much for coming in. What a show we have got for you this evening. You're not going to believe the guest we've got. But before we get into that, I want to say, ladies and gentlemen, I hope you'll all join me. Blazeman, run up the colors because we got to get moving here. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And what a beautiful flag it is. And we have a fellow that is coming in, ladies and gentlemen, who he himself, along with countless others of his brethren and Sethran, worked for many years to preserve, protect, and defend its flying over our lands. We have this evening with us a guest, a fellow by the name of Dr. Peter Burke, an educational doctorate fellow who he himself spent 15 years in the Army and retired from as a sergeant, working in many times humanitarian services, who has written himself a wonderful book and shared his experiences, one man's experience, seeking higher education as a person, not only with the ordinary challenges of life, but also being challenged with post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD. We'll be getting to Dr. Burke in a couple of minutes, but before we get into that, I want to bring people all together in this one thing, and so that there's absolutely no question in your mind how I feel about what is going on, about the persecution of former President Donald Trump. Now, we have seen things that have gone on for I don't know how long, and all of these things have gone on since before he was actually president, coming out with these crazy inane claims about things with crimes against women and this and that and blah, 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 blah. And every time they get someone goes out and then, oh, suddenly another comes out and another one and another one. They did that. Then it was all the things about the Russian collusion and this thing and that thing and blah, 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 and the impeachments and blah, 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 and this thing and that thing. Every time the man turned a corner or they were there slapping some other sausage big bullshit with egg thing thrown down on top of them, and now they are perpetrating heinous crimes now, turning around, trying to say things, indictments about this, indictments of that, blah, 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 blah. Enough. Enough. I don't know if anybody else is there of the same way. I'm sure there are plenty of people, but we've seen enough. We've heard enough. It is nothing but freaking left-wing rhetoric bullshit. And let's leave it with that. That having been said, ladies and gentlemen, I would like you to bring in, and we got a moment here, my dear friend Blazeman, our engineer, will be bringing in Dr. Peter Burke. He's fellow sought higher education, met friends in Connecticut and so forth, and other places. He's wrote a book about his experience seeking higher education and eventually reaching the doctorate. But the man also spent many of his years teaching people and helping people. And before that, let's get him out here and hear what his life's journey has been about. Blazeman, if you would please, would like to introduce Dr. Peter Burke. I want to thank you very much, all the way down from down south, where I'm sure it's nice and cool, isn't it, right now? I hope you have a drip pan underneath you because it's got to be somewhere close to the 100-degree mark.
Well, at one point in time I did, but it's down in the mid to low 80s now, so it's not too
Well,
bad. It rained earlier.
I do some cooking, so I'll send you a basting bulb if you need that.
Well, yeah, mine's getting rather warm now. So
yeah, all right, Dr. Burke, I want to thank you very much first off for coming in and agreeing to do this. You recently have had a book get published, and apparently it's doing very, very well. And I'll tell you, I've got a look at it. It is quite a page turner, and it tells quite the story. I'm going to read a little something here. Again, this comes from one of I believe it was the Amazon thing. This book was about the academic journey of a student living with PTSD in his quest to improve his life. The author, Dr. Peter Burke, educational doctorate, Sergeant USA retired, shares fraternal stories and the importance of having support in an academic environment, many of which turned into lifelong friendships. And the educational doctorate student, the author's research into the availability of support for the PTSD in the academic setting is both personal and informational. He shares his story with the hope that other veterans and student veterans will read about his journey and be motivated to move forward in their lives. Now, if anything at all ever screams to me that you were a person reaching out to others to help them, I don't know that there ever was. The only other thing that screams to me louder is the Almighty's Bible itself. You sound to me as though a person who in your time now is reaching out and trying to help others. Let's walk back here and start me with your beginning of time in the military. Where you went and what drove you there?
Al, I always wanted to serve because it was not really a family tradition. My dad was in the Navy. Prior to that, lots of uncles and relatives like that were in the military. So, you know, I didn't join the Navy because I did not want to be known as Chief Burke's son. Of course, to me, my dad is, and everywhere, and everybody knows him and bows down to him because he's, almost chief of the boat. He was number
You're
two.
your own man.
Yeah. So I went into the Army, and then had a good old time. The wall came down, and things happened and didn't happen, and the Cold War heated up, and everybody's labels changed, and then things happened, and I retired. A lot of things happened, and and when I got out, it was in 1996. I'm not trying to give a history lesson here. Um, and I was having problems, not just transitioning to being a civilian, but I was also having problems transitioning prior to that, going from deployable units to a non-deployable unit, 7th Flight Infantry, 25th Infantry, 10th Mountain Division. Those were all light infantry divisions to the Fort Field Artillery Training Center, so that was a big change. And then there was a change going from civil to military to civilian. And one of the stories I say in the book, I talk about a little incident that I thought my roommate was getting beaten up. And so I was going to, oh no, this is not happening on my watch. And I feel a little tap and I hear click, click. And I'm encouraged to stay out of it. And that's when I realized that, yeah, I have got to get out of here. I cannot do this. And so that's made me go to school. And so I went to Cameron University. It was, literally a stone throw from Fort Sill. But I was also the oldest student. I was older than a lot of my professors. And I was the only veteran that I knew of, really, I think in the whole music department. And so between what I saw there and then what I saw over at the University of Oklahoma when I went for my master's there with more veterans, a little bit class Division I school, more populous, it was a little bit more visual. And then what I've compared to what I've seen through my doctorate journey with the number of veterans that are getting out and going to school, I was like, okay, well, let me see if I can help some of them by going, okay, this is what I went through, this is what we had.
Okay, let me stop you there.
Yeah.
I want to step back a little bit here so that the viewers in the world gets a really good flavor of exactly, because I've read about this, of exactly what your background is and your musical trail as you left and the the trail that you've walked with the military. I mean, from what I've read, you've done things. You've uh, played music with a number of different groups and so forth, and you've done things. You've saluted heads of state. You've
Mhm.
played music for, I guess, people who were being memorialized for the Challenger disaster, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
You've played halfway around the world, all the way around the world. Please tell us a little more about this walk, this journey.
Well, as an Army bandsman in the 80s, light infantry, we had many, many hats. And when I say light infantry, that's to say that everything goes on your back. Now, whether that's instruments or otherwise, it doesn't matter because even though we were Army bandsmen, we still had um, our other operational missions
You're
and
still
other
a foot
things like
soldier.
that. So we were still soldiers. Oh, yeah, very much so. We guard the general, traffic control points, and mostly security things and like that. And so, there was a lot of opportunity. I went to a lot of different military schools and had a lot of opportunity to excel there. I met Ernest Borgnine one time when he was a grand marshal in a parade. Had a good 30, 45-minute conversation with the man, and, his hand, it was like, I felt like a 4-year-old shaking the man's hand. He has such a commanding presence, and he is tall, wide. I mean, he is high, and you knew you were in the presence of greatness.
Wow.
I loved it. I loved it. And I remember, playing for Queen Elizabeth, several presidents. I've played concerts in places that I love to talk about and just sing, but I'm not sure if we have all that kind of time because I would love to tell you what it was like to play in Thailand or in Korea or down
Go
to
ahead.
Australia for their 200th bicentenary done there in 1988 in Australia. It was phenomenal. It was great.
Wow, that sounds like it would be something quite special to have done. Now, in your travels and and so forth that you've gone through, you, as I understand, it, you are a horn player.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, did you only limit yourself to that, or what else did you do?
I played a lot of military funerals. I played taps quite a bit, and it was an honor to do every single one.
Okay, but now my point being, did you also go in and lead or conduct or
Oh
teach
yes,
while you were
yes,
there?
yes. Yeah,
Okay, and
I had the opportunity several times to conduct different concerts. We had one several times we would have NCO concerts, do the whole thing. We would a bunch of us would do it. I've conducted concerts myself. I've conducted graduation ceremonies myself. I've drum majored parades. I've had quite a bit of leadership and stick time, as it were. So,
okay. I'm going to ask you one more question about this, then we're going to get into the meat of your book. Um, Pick for me probably what you could think would be the most gratifying of your experiences when you were acting in your capacity as a sergeant in the United States Army.
most gratifying, it would come down to personally and as a unit, I would say any humanitarian mission would be my unit. Personally, it would be um, second place playing that Challenger astronaut. I had all of a sudden his name Okuda. No, that's from Star Trek. Anyways, I don't want to mess up his name because I can't remember it now because I'm trying to think about it. But it'll come to
Sorry.
me when I won't need it. But that's okay. And every funeral that I've ever played for a fallen service member, that was
Quite
the most
a
gratifying. I have to say
quite,
that.
quite a dynamic person, heart and soul indeed. Let's get now into the portion of your walk in life that gets onto your book. Your book basically is about what you went through trying to get yourself an education, and it sounds to me like you got all the education not to gratify yourself, but in order to pick up and continue on helping other people, which is it's a phenomenal thing. It's a very it's a very good thing to see. It's wonderful. Uh, when you got into all of this, I can imagine you wrote the book for a reason. You must have started running into some sort of what you felt like were stone walls. What were your experiences with this?
Okay. I found that during my undergrad years, I would find that I was by myself, even though that Cameron University had a working relationship with Fort Sill. I had somewhat of a familiarity with some of the people, because of my time performing with the 77th, we would do things combined with them. That was sort of easing of the transition, but I found myself to be quite alone. I was like, there's nobody here with no hair. Of course, at the time, I still had my high and tight, and then I let it grow, and then I go back and forth. I found that it was like, I'm used to a structure. I get up, I do this, the way the regimented military style is. There was a lot less structure. It was a lot more, okay, these are your classes, you know when to be there. It was all my responsibility. I didn't have to worry about, waking somebody else up to say, okay, you guys have to do this now, go do it. And I wasn't being told, okay, we got to get this done. You know what I'm saying? So it's a little bit different because in the military, you had a chain of command. When you're a student veteran, the chain of command is, well, everything is up to me. And I had one instructor. His nickname is Big Dog. I dedicated my next book that's coming out to him. He was a Marine, and I found that I connected with him pretty much instantly, as before I connected with some of my other instructors and some of the students. And I connected with those that I worked with more on a musical collaboration first before it was with others. So I kind of was like, okay, I reached out to those that I had some type of commonality with, but I was kind of lucky in that aspect. Not a lot of student veterans were. And then when I went to my master's up at OU, I was welcomed with open arms, especially from my fraternity. And the brothers of Kappa Kappa Psi and the sisters of Tau Beta Sigma, I was like, hi, and it was like one big happy family. So I had kind of established a support system from previous, and there was a lot more of a military support presence. In other words, they had offices for veterans to say, okay, you got your education office, we got this. Okay, we have
So
the
there
education
was like an
transition center.
ombudsman for military persons.
Yeah, things. This is around 2010 or so. Your veteran service organizations started showing up within campuses. A little bit more attention was focused on, okay, getting veterans in and transitioning them, as far as vocational rehab and education
Mm-hmm.
assistance and things like that.
Tell me something. We'd had a discussion earlier. I made a note about this. You'd mentioned something about differences in education process. PTSD causes problems in classes and on campus and with home life. Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, PTSD will cause you sometimes to you go like this. It's the connections are made. You're good. Other times you're going like this because it can't quite fit, and then it will. A lot of times you get cause confusion, and sometimes, well, in a classroom environment, very common in history. Actually, I was an undergrad, and there was a Vietnam veteran there that said, "Oh, I don't need to be here." Packed up his stuff and walked out. And the professor was like, "Where are you going?" And the guy's like, "I'm in that," and left. And the presentation was on part of the Vietnam War and like that. I got up and followed him out. I really didn't watch it because I was just kind of curious. We grew up with the Vietnam War in our living room every day. So, I mean, these kids were like, I was old enough to be their dad and almost grandfather. But, so I went out and talked to that veteran, and we hung out at the student union for a while. Nowadays, when I was in grad school, there were veterans that were from Desert Shield, Desert Storm, and then later on, you're going to have Storm 2, Operation Iraqi Freedom, and some of the operations going on now where these guys are coming back and they're going into a classroom. And a mere presentation could be like, oh, I'm back there. The mere smell or sight or any type of stimuli that they're not expecting
triggers.
Yeah. And so, and some of these are common in classroom environments for as presentations, especially visual or audio where you hear it. Not so much oral when you just hear things, unless it's more of a language. There were some times when there was, I forget what dialect it was that was spoken somewhere, and the gentleman I was with got real harsh on his eyes, and he just kind of looked, and I went, yeah, he's been there. And it brought back memories, kind of like back in the day with, if just some of my brother's friends or some of my other friends from back there, where they would hear Vietnamese, you would see the square shoulders and the face because they would hear the language. Okay. And so all these stimuli, people don't really think about it. The large crowds. What does that sound like? Well, that could sound like an M60, or that could be just sound like someone banging on a table. And these are common everyday things, and those are the things that veterans deal with, and not all professors are aware of how their presentation or how their classroom environment can affect their students in as far as their mental state goes.
Did you find that the educational facilities administration was somewhat stymied or dog-eared back about dealing with people with PTSD and trying to get them through the educational process?
Okay, that's good. It's funny because when it started out, the PTSD really wasn't in the diagnostic statistic manual or whatever it is that medical thing is until I believe the late 90s. And so I noticed it wasn't really being addressed during my bachelor times at Cameron, and then when I was at my master's times at Cameron, it had started to be, because it had started being recognized. And this was a school that had tight affiliations with Fort Sill. Their education office would come over there. They would have classes at Fort Sill. They would do things audiovisually, so that the far off campuses can do. And so the PTSD awareness started, and this is probably 2001, 2002, when I was in my master's program at Cameron. By the time I went for my master's at OU, PTSD awareness had arisen. Now I could go from Catlett Hall. I walked out the door, took a right, walked about 100 meters, turned right, walked in the door there, and that was a health clinic. Now,
what?
When I was at Cameron University, the hospital was across the street.
Okay, all right.
Or there's like an hour and a half. A minute and a half, mile and a half away for the Lee Boulevard Hospital. So there, I was lucky, and there were facilities close by. And then at OU, when they were close by as well, but there were more of them, and they altered and added programs. And this is in the 2010s or so. And then later on, in the early 2020s, 2015 or so, I did some research on the perspectives of student veterans with PTSD and availability of PTSD support services on campus. Okay, and this is what veterans think is available and out there, what they found. And granted, there was more awareness and programs that were starting to be out there, but there was, connecting it with VA was not happening. You had to be a student, you had to be enrolled in their programs and like that. And I only believe out of the 92 installations, 8 offered PTSD support in some way, shape, form, or fashion out of the 90.
Wow. Let me ask you this. Yeah. At this point, where did the Americans with Disabilities Act come in? And because people weren't really in the queue about PTSD, when did they start making it all, putting all the pieces of this puzzle together?
All right. Trying to think. When I worked at Cameron University, I was in charge of the Fine Arts Lab Music Library. I was in charge of the reconstruction and renovations, of our facility for the ADA to make sure, that it stayed in compliant. And I took out some stations and made it a little bit more roomier. So that was back in early 2000s. So I think the ADA came in probably in the 80s or 90s. I'm not really sure how long it's been actually for the ADA, because it's been around for the physical aspects of it for so long. When the mental aspects of it came around is probably 1997 or so, when PTSD was recognized by the DSMB or whatever that manual is. I forget the acronym for it. But I think that's when it started, once it got officially recognized. That's when I started thinking it started getting inclusion more into the ADA.
Now, I had mentioned before, or you had mentioned before, about what life was like. You were being. Are you there?
Yeah.
Okay.
We're good.
Sorry, I just got a message that something was wrong.
Yeah, me too.
There, that the I guess the student body, younger versus older and so forth, self-segregated. Is there any reason to believe that this is something that can be overcome or corrected so that the entire student body these days will meld together as one, or is this just going to be birds of a feather?
Initially, it's going to be birds of a feather, because veterans will seek out other veterans at first and then branch out. I think that's just normally hardwired into us. If we move someplace, we tend to gravitate to what we know first before we reach out. We establish a little home base and then expand outward. Being the fact that student veterans, well, they're probably coming in earlier. So if you graduate high school at 18, 4 years of college, it's 22. Or say, even if it's just a 2 or 3 or 4 year enlistment, you're still looking at, 19, 20, 22 years old. And then they enter the academic world at 22. That's young. That's still closer to the traditional student's age there at like 18 or 19. But it wasn't me when I entered it, 40 years old.
Wow.
I have.
I'm going to ask you to hold that thought.
Integration.
We're gonna come back in a couple minutes. We're gonna take a break, and in about 3.5 minutes, we're gonna come back and we're gonna delve a little bit more into the personal aspect of your ties to this book and that pussycat you got over there. Say hello, ladies and gentlemen. We're talking with Dr. Peter Burke from all the way down south, staying warm as he can, and we'll be right back, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.
In the distance, light years from tomorrow, far beyond yesterday, she is watching, heart aching with sorrow. She is broken as she waits, hoping when all is said and done, we learn to love and be as one. Oh, starlight, don't you cry, we're gonna
And ladies and gentlemen, we are back here politicking with Mr. B. I want to say thank you very much for tuning in and watching, everybody. I want to reach out and say thank you very much by the people that are watching, that have been putting up some messages. We're not ignoring you. We're just really enthralled with our guest we have here. We have a Dr. Peter Burke. For those of you who are tuning in, a fellow from down south who spent 15 years in the United States military as an Army representative and plays a wonderful French horn, I believe. Has done an awful lot of things in the world to be helping people out. Got out of the military, has gone through the educational system, and is still doing things now to try to make things better for people seeking higher education that have post traumatic stress disorder. Has written a book, A Student Veteran's Experience with Higher Education and Academic Journey. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to bring back and thank very much for coming in, Dr. Peter Burke. We want to introduce you again. Thank you very much for coming, Doctor.
Hola.
Glad to have you in. This segment of the show, we're going to get a little more personal here. Again, I'll touch on the fact that it seems as though every direction we've gone here, it seems that you've been doing things not just for doing things for yourself or serving yourself. You've been doing things to help better the lives of other people. And I'd like you to reach down and tell me, influence me if you could, who, if you could pick out one person, identify one person, save all, who influenced you the most to walk in this direction?
That's easy. My dad.
Okay.
Hands down. Hands down. He was and still is in my mind. He will always be an honorable man, and he was always been in search for knowledge. He always was there for me. Even whenever he came back from his deployments, I never ever remember him not having time. And then after he retired, he went back to school and did some things there. He was always having a search for knowledge, but he always had time for the family. And I remember him saying, do it right the first time, and you will succeed, because you always have to try, and you always have to try something once and try it a second time, just to be sure. And then if it's a third time, then you obviously like it and you're obviously on the path. But he usually had the right thing in his mind to say, okay, this is what for the right advice and the right enthusiasm. I mean, I don't ever remember him. Gosh, he was a wonderful father and a great role model. I don't ever remember him being anything other than a student or a teacher. I mean, he was always trying to teach us a little something, but he always wanted to learn too.
Wonderful. I just wanted to take a moment and reach out to our engineer, Blazeman. Thank you very much. Up on the notice is, if maybe you can put something in a crawl space or something. We have here the address that you can go to if you want to obtain this book, buy it. You can either get a hard copy, I believe it's paperback, or they also have one for Kindle that you can get, and the prices are somewhat quite a little bit disparate. The physical book is $14.99 if I'm not mistaken, and I believe I saw something come across my feed that the Kindle was only 99 cents. So but I don't keep a Kindle. If I'm going to have a book, I'd rather have a book in my hand. And thank you very much. I'll be
Me too.
reaching for that, because when the power goes out, you can't read the damn thing. If I had a Kindle, I can still open the book. So
there you go.
If you're interested in reading this book, it is quite a read, and it puts an awful lot of insight. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but have you not also reached out to others, or reaching out to others, or continuing to reach out in another issue you've got coming?
Yes. I have a manuscript that I'm working on cover art and things like that for. It's the same series, but this one is on social family, and fraternal support, and Peppy too, because I touch on service dogs.
Really?
And
Wow.
this already um, twice the length of the first one, as it should be, because the academic journey was just that. It's an academic journey. It was just the base, broad, and my next two go into more detail and more specifics, more stories, more details about those stories, and more literature, that will also inform as well. So,
Can you give us a taste of sampling? What our appetite, so to speak? I'd love to hear this.
all right, let me see here. Okay, I just opened up to a random page 35. Oh, that's blah blah blah. But okay. During my during my academic journey, especially in the 21st century, I observed that the number of student veterans had consistently been on the rise. The U.S. Census Bureau and VA both validate my observation. A student veteran is becoming a larger percentage of the total student population in the United States. Many have left part of themselves in a distant place, some in places civilians will never hear about, but student veterans are returning to the civilian world to continue their career deployment, or excuse me, their career development, or to begin a new one. Student veterans carry the physical, emotional, and psychological scars from their past life experiences with them every day, never escaping and always alone. It's important to consider what was given and to give back. Wow, that's the first paragraph in one of those. Let me see here. I wonder if I have a good story to share.
I'd love to hear it.
All right. Oh, this was. Hang on, I gotta find a story. Here's Peppy. Okay. All right, now for a different member of my family. This is, I don't know about. Anyways, it's a Peppy dog. He's a Dachshund. He's a Corgi mix. So he's long and low. Little extra hair. Now for a different member of my family, Peppy. He wasn't a service dog, however, he didn't need any training. He just knew what to do and when, naturally. He's a Corgi and Dachshund mix, I think. He may have something else in there, I'm not really sure. He also got along with my cats. He'd even sleep with them. Peppy seemed to be always close by, well, within arm's reach, anyways. And he always glad to see me when I came home. He knew a walk was coming. He loved the backyard and the access to and from the garage, and he enjoyed playing catch. I remember times when I wasn't feeling quite right, and there would be a long dog nose pushing my leg or giving me a poke. He'd be asking for some attention, distracting me from where I was and guiding me to a better place. On days when I didn't want to do anything or go anywhere except take him out, he'd want to go out a little more often, and he'd stay out a little longer. He'd do his business each time, but he wanted me to move and be active. Well, at least minimally active. I remember times when I had to remember to eat. Yep, Peppy would remind me to eat once a day, usually if it got too late at night, after his evening stroll. Have you ever seen a dog that's about a foot tall and about a foot and a half, 2 feet long, up on the counter? Yeah, well, he would try to reach up on the counter there and bark at it to get me to he'd get up there and remind me to cook, go get some food and stuff. I always felt his unconditional love, and he died 12 December 2017, and he was 20 years old.
I'm so sorry to hear that. That's remarkable.
He's a good dog. He was a great dog.
The more I see it, the more I see soup to nuts of this thing. Is basically you've written your way into the educational system, not for the intelligentsia, but for all the rest of the people, the real people of the world that really need to seek the education and use it wisely. It seems to me that you're gauging and reaching out to others and welcoming them into the path of the otherwise the inane and insane. It's going to be quite thrilling going through these things now, but there also has to have been some situations of frustration. Can you tell us something about some of these examples? There has to have been.
Frustrations as far
as going through the educational process, trying to.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Well, I became a single parent in a very unorthodox way. My son was put on a bus and said, "Here you go," and he was 5 months from being 18 years old. So I kind of had some problems as far as getting to and from, and when power was out and things like that. I missed a final because the power went out and things like that, and being so far away, I had to reschedule. But thankfully, with the technology and my relationship with my professors and like that, things were able to be done. I was able to do it with a video. Thank you, Elgin High School. You guys were awesome. And Matt McLean, you were the director there at the time. Well, and so it was fresh. Part of it was because of how far away I lived from that school when I was going to school. I drove an hour and 15 minutes one way to get there. The frustration was because I couldn't get there, but technology, things worked out. And I think other students have the same thing. Well, they miss a class for some reason or another. Sometimes it's because of a vehicle problem. Other times it's because of a weather-related problem and like that. And I think those frustrations are some of the common frustrations that all of us have faced. As students. My experiences were unique to me. I don't know how many other people had their truck blow up, but we've all missed classes or had vehicle problems.
What about from an administration standpoint?
The paperwork, oh my God. Okay. In the beginning, it was the only paperwork you could do was education benefits, and that seemed like it took forever. And the FAFSA seemed like it took forever, even though it was all online. I went to Cameron University, type. It seemed like every time I typed something, they would want scanned and electronic copies of everything. Well, great. Then why is it that I go to a physical office, a physical address, physical person, and they go, okay, we want copies of this, and this. It's like, wait a second, I emailed all those in and downloaded them or whatever. Well, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, okay, blah, blah, blah. I go back to the blah, 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 get my stuff, come back, and here you go. I found that very frustrating back in 1997. The process was more effective and more efficient later on. When I was in my second master's, probably around 2009, 2010 or so, it was more effective and efficient because everything had been, I won't say perfected, but it had been commonplace to do things online and send things electronically. Oh, just put it on the site, boom, off you go. And you can send your unofficial transcripts, you fill out the application, you attach this, that, and the other thing, and it's good. And when I walked into the office for this, that, and the other thing, it was like, okay, we got this, and this. Sign this. Okay. Walked off my door.
Things going online in this instant case made things technologically easier and more streamlined.
Until it didn't. If there was a problem with your if there was a problem with the electronics or the network was down or blah blah blah, then you were screwed.
I could see how that could happen, indeed.
And now don't get me wrong. There were times when it didn't always work out, and there were times when it was smooth as silk. Later on into my doctoral program, especially after with COVID and everything else like that, online programs have like blown up. And so if someone needs something, a physical copy after they've already downloaded it or everything else like that, go somewhere else.
Wow.
Because everything is so convenient now until it doesn't work.
You had mentioned a second master's program. What are your master's degrees in, and how many do you have?
I have a master's of music education, and I got that from University of Oklahoma. Uh, Secondary instrumental conducting. I have a Master of Arts in teaching, and I got that from Cameron University, and that is in secondary vocal education.
Wow. Okay. Are you going to go back to teaching?
I've been looking for some teaching jobs, and actually, since this year I've been more competitive than I have been in other years, and partially that was because of publishing in the Journal of Veteran Studies, and I think partially because I have published with that book as well. So I've been a little bit more marketable. I'm I just received notice today that I was, sorry, but thank you, but come back for a full-time position. However, I'm still in the running for an adjunct position. So, we'll see what happens. And I still offer my research and writing services, you know, but
You can only burn a candle at so many different ends before you have no wax left. So
yeah,
yeah.
well, I mean, the research and writing is, mostly the books. And I did one article for the Journal of Veteran Studies, and it was a web survey of what was out there as far as PTSD support. That's the one I quoted where I had the 92 institutions and 3 posted coordination with the VA,
All right.
88 posted support as far as their healthcare system and like that. And with the National Healthcare Act, this is why.
Wow. Now I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. Think if you can. Has there been anybody through all of this journey of you that like helped pick you up by the seat of your pants and get you in the right direction and going things? Maybe when things got a little rough, maybe you want to shout out to them, give them give them a shout of thanks and so forth. Let us know what part they played, what role they played in your walk here, getting to this point.
Well, I was on leave back in, oh gosh, back in the 80s. And I met a friend of mine at the Comet who was a special education teacher. And I used to love the stories and like that. And so that kind of put me on the education path. Now, as far as getting in, that's how I got in. Now, getting through it, I would have to say from afar, my parents, because, they knew I was in undergrad and going to school in Oklahoma and like that. And they, tried their best to encourage me and things like that. But I would have to say my brothers and sisters of Kappa Kappa Psi and Tau Beta Sigma, as far as the Zeta Tau chapter at Cameron University, there's really just not one person. Of course, I can single out the big dog, and I did single big dog out in my second book. I probably should have done it in the third book because that's the one on musical support. But I'm not changing it.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Big Dog just passed away not too recently, and so the second book's
I'm so sorry to hear that. At what point, let me ask you, do you anticipate your second book rolling out?
Well, a couple of months maybe. I'm doing cover
Okay.
art and things like that now, and I don't really have a. I'm doing it as I can scrape the funds together to get it done. So you know, little it's
You,
gonna be slow, but hopefully eventually, pretty soon. Yeah.
well, that's all. Let's all wish that you have continued success with this in your chapter and continue on with this. And I want to reach out and say, by the way, thank you very much for all the service that you provided to the American people and to the protectorates under whose wing there is. I want to thank you very much for coming on and sharing your time and your experience and explaining all this to us. It's been quite eye opening and quite enlightening. It's nice to know now that there are some people out there that are advocates that can help our people that are coming out of these situations and may have post traumatic stress that are there to help walk through the muck and mire so that they can continue to flourish in life. Dr. Peter Burke, I want to say thank you very much for your time And we will see you again, I'm sure, soon in a follow-up interview on book number 2. Thank you so much for coming in.
Mr. B, thanks a lot, Guy.
Glad to have you. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that is about what we've got for our show this evening. I want to thank you all for watching. If you like this, share this, please send us a note. Let you know what you had to say about it. If there was something maybe I should have broached on that I missed, hey, I'm a human being. I only have 2 eyes. I got a fresh pair of eyes can help me see something else. Please let me know. I hope you enjoyed this interview and our guest, Dr. Peter Burke. Please, by all means, I invite you to go ahead. There's that address, amazon.com, DP slash 0 B0C5L 2CRJB will get you to where you can buy this book, and I'm sure you'll be very, very happy with it. I'm Mr. B. This has been Politicking with Mr. B. I want to reach out to our friend Blazeman, the engineer, who has been taking care of us all this evening, and thank everybody here. We will have another show coming up next Wednesday night. Until then, we've got other things coming on, ladies and gentlemen. We will see you all again soon. Take care.